There's a dormant prehistoric volcano under Stoke-on-Trent. Jacobite soldiers invented Staffordshire oatcakes. There's a mass grave under the A500. Hey up everyone, welcome to Stokie Towk, the channel dedicated to the Potteries Dialect and the general history and culture of North Staffordshire. I've decided to make a bit more of a podcast-like series for a couple of reasons. One, I've got a few interesting topics I want to talk about, and two, it saves me doing a lot of video editing for fancy graphics and that sort of thing, because I'm a bit pushed for time at the minute. So these episodes are mainly going to be me talking, but I will add a few supporting images where they're needed. I'm going to try and stick to sort of one theme per episode. And this week's theme is the weirdest urban legends that I've ever heard about Stoke-on-Trent and North Staffordshire. Now these are things that keep persisting in sort of popular conscience, and they keep resurfacing on the internet and social media and that sort of thing every now and again. Now this week I'm deliberately sort of avoiding like paranormal type stories and that sort of thing, because there's an absolute plethora of them relating to Stoke-on-Trent, and that could warrant a whole new episode, so I plan to cover that in a future episode. So for now we're going to cover stuff that I want to say is a bit more down to earth, but still a bit weird and wonderful all the same. Right, so let's get into it then. What weird urban legends are there about Stoke-on-Trent? So the first is that there's actually a prehistoric dormant supervolcano directly underneath the city of Stoke-on-Trent, and it could erupt at any time, causing millions of pounds worth of improvements. I jest before you get onto me in the comments. I know, it's not cool to bash your city, but we all do it. So yeah, at some point we're going to get this cataclysmic event where the entire area of North Staffordshire just gets wiped completely off the map by this erupting supervolcano at some point. Could be tomorrow, could be in a few 100 million years, who knows. And this rumour has persisted around for quite a long time. It seems to keep coming up in discussions every now and again. It crops up on social media. And I'm fairly certain I've even heard people asking serious questions about like whether we could harness its geothermal energy and turn Stoke-on-Trent into like a mini Iceland that just thrives off free geothermal energy. I mean, it'd be a lovely idea if we could, wouldn't it? And I've even heard rumours that like council roadworks and stuff are implementing measures to try and tap this energy source. So where did this actually come from, and is it true? Could Stoke-on-Trent potentially be the new Iceland, and could we all be benefiting from nice warm homes courtesy of volcanic energy coming from deep underneath the earth? Well, unfortunately no, it's not remotely true at all. I'm not actually sure where this rumour started, but it's believed that there is sort of archaeological evidence around for like igneous rocks under the soil around Stoke-on-Trent that were found during coal mining operations and that sort of thing. So there's definitely like geological history there to suggest that there might have been volcanic activity in the area around North Staffordshire in prehistoric times, but it probably stopped about 200 to 300 million years ago. There certainly isn't an active or even a dormant volcano anywhere near Stoke-on-Trent in this day and age, and a lot of the sort of roadworks that have been suggested were trying to tap this sort of energy source were actually looking more closer to home in resources that were left behind in mines and that sort of thing. So, you know, trap pockets and like methane gas and that sort of thing. Or they were sort of installing the more conventional kind of deep ground heat pumps that you can install just about anywhere, because naturally it does get warmer as you get further down into the ground everywhere, as is demonstrated in sort of mines all over the world. So no, we are not going to get geothermal energy from a dormant volcano anytime soon. But maybe we will, using more conventional methods, you never know. So we're going to have to say that this one is categorically false. There is no evidence that there is currently an active volcano anywhere near Stoke-on-Trent, but perhaps there was if we travelled back in time 300 million years. Now, the second one I wanted to talk about was actually triggered to me by a comment on one of my other videos about the Jacobite rebellion in Staffordshire, which I found really, really interesting, and I really desperately wanted this one to be true. This rumour is that the Jacobite army, when it marched through Staffordshire during the rebellion of 1745, actually invented Staffordshire oatcakes. Now, they have oatcakes in Scotland, but they're quite a bit different. They're not proper oatcakes like ours. Again, joking, don't get angry at me. But they are completely different. So a Scottish oatcake's a bit like a hard, round biscuit type thing. And Staffordshire oatcakes, if you don't know, are like a sort of flat pancake type thing, with oats added, obviously, to make it an oatcake. So the story goes that they didn't have sufficient quantities of oats to support their entire army, so instead of being able to make the traditional Scottish oatcakes, they ended up making a sort of watered-down version that ended up resembling more of a pancake, and that became in time the Staffordshire oatcake. So, yeah, these Scottish soldiers accidentally invented Staffordshire oatcakes while they were marching through the region. So what about this one then? Could this possibly be true? I really, really wanted it to be, because that's quite a cool story, to be honest, and I thought, that's quite a romantic-like story, but unfortunately, no, it doesn't seem to be true at all. Well, there's no particular hard evidence for it, it's probably more of an urban legend. It could probably be disproven quite easily, because in fact, the recipe for Scottish-style oatcakes are actually nothing like the recipe for Staffordshire oatcakes at all. They don't resemble each other in the slightest. For a start, Staffordshire oatcakes have yeast in them, so they're actually leavened, and the batter that it ends up creating is more like that of a crumpet or something like that than it is a Scottish oatcake. But no, Scottish oatcakes don't contain yeast, so the method of making them is completely different, so they wouldn't have accidentally stumbled upon them while they were trying to make Scottish oatcakes unless they really, really messed up. And also, oats were quite abundant in Staffordshire, and they always have been, hence why oatcakes are such a popular food round here. So the likelihood is that they wouldn't have been short of oats to try and feed their army. They would have been able to get a supply of them locally quite easily. But the main thing that does disprove this is archaeological evidence suggests methods for cooking oatcakes were around for centuries before the Jacobites arrived. A lot of archaeology suggests that things like baking stones and skillets and all that kind of thing were used in the region for centuries before 1745. So it's not inconceivable that, this primary method of cooking oatcakes is much, much older than the Jacobite rebellion. How widespread Staffordshire oatcakes were at the time of the rebellion is probably a matter of debate. Of course, they certainly didn't become more popular until people had far less time during the Industrial Revolution. So they became popular amongst pottery workers and people of industry because they're quick and easy to make. They got quite a good source of calories for your sort of manual labour. But the evidence does suggest that we certainly had the facilities and the resources to make and cook Staffordshire oatcakes since the medieval period. So I'm going to say this story about the Jacobite army inventing Staffordshire oatcakes by accident is just a romantic urban legend. It's not true. Though I really wish it was, because that's really cool. Also, I'm guessing the Jacobites didn't take proper oatcakes back up to Scotland with them because they still eat those terrible hard round biscuit type ones to this day. So, no lessons learnt there then. So the final one I wanted to look at is the rumour that there is a mass grave buried under the A500. For those who don't know, the A500 is like the sort of Stoke bypass, so it passes right through from junction 15 of the M6 and links sort of junction 16 and branches off on the A50 to the way, so it's a bit like the big dual-carriageway that runs all the way through Stoke-on-Trent, and it was built at various times throughout the later 20th century. So the section of the road in question was constructed in the 1970s, and it refers to the area just by Glebe Street. So these days there's a bridge that goes over the A500 linking Stoke Town to Stoke Railway Station, and it's roughly where this bridge is that this burial site was supposedly discovered, and where the road passes over it to this day. So this land did at one time belong to St. Peter's Church, which still has a big burial ground these days, but it used to be much larger than it is now. So a lot of the land where the A500 runs through now was actually bought off the church, and one area of that graveyard was known amongst the locals as the Cholera area, and it was believed that there were indeed mass burials there from back in the day. Obviously these graves are sort of unmarked, and later some of the land was built over as well. So during the 1970s, they had to demolish quite a lot of Victorian buildings to make way for the A500. So there were a couple of pubs on Glebe Street and Victorian terraced houses and that sort of thing that were demolished to make way for the new road. And so the story goes that they discovered a mass grave while they were doing this. And to this day, sort of paranormal type explorers and all that sort of thing mentioned that they feel the area has got really bad vibes and bad energy, and it's just not a nice place to walk through and that sort of thing. I don't know about that, but I did walk along that road after I got off the train from London at 11 o'clock at night once. It's dark, it's lonely. It's not a very nice place to walk, but I wouldn't have attributed it to ghosts. and this was before I was aware of this story, actually. So I didn't feel particularly uneasy myself, outside of walking along a lonely, dark road on my own at night. But hey-ho, anyway, let's crack on and explore whether this rumour is actually true. Well, actually, this one is 100% true, although the grave in question isn't actually still there, so that's the made-up bit. It's not buried under the road to this day, and, the area isn't haunted by the lingering spirits of these people, as far as I know, because the graves were actually moved during the construction of the road. So just as the sort of popular belief was at the time, yes, there were mass burial pits in the graveyard of St. Peter's, and yes, they were in the path of the road, and they were discovered in the mid-1970s. Now, I mentioned that the area of that graveyard was known as the cholera area, but it's highly unlikely that these pits were actually cholera pits, as they were later described. Cholera wasn't really a known thing until like the 1830s, and it was believed that these pits, and indeed they were actually dated to be much earlier than that, they were in fact 17th century. So the likely cause of these mass graves was probably an outbreak of the plague, like bubonic plague, which was fairly common in the area and has several sort of documented historical outbreaks. So it's more likely that they were plague pits than cholera pits. But nonetheless, yes, there were mass graves there, but they weren't left in situ and the road wasn't built over the top of them. They were in fact moved and they were all reinterred in Hartshill Cemetery in the 1970s. So there are no bodies left under the A500 to this day, and one assumes, therefore, no sort of lingering malevolent spirits. I remember hearing a similar rumour about the A34 just outside of Royal Stoke Hospital as well. Like I'd heard a rumour that there was a mass grave down there as well. I think probably the two stories probably got mixed up at some point, but indeed, where the A34 runs outside of the hospital has always been a road. There was in fact a burial ground on the other side of that road that belonged to what used to be the workhouse before it became the Royal Stoke Hospital. Like a lot of the older buildings belonged to Stoke Union Workhouse, and there was a burial site on the opposite side of London Road that was paved over when the road was widened in the 20th century. So that might be the origin of that rumour, and in that case, yes, the road was probably built directly over the top of the paupers' graves that were there. It wasn't sort of common practice to exhume and rebury paupers at the time, so yes, there are probably graves buried somewhere under the A34 just outside of the Royal Stoke Hospital, but no mass graves and no cholera pits or anything like that. So there we are, we're going to wrap it up for this episode then. So had you heard any of these stories before, and what are your takes on them? Have you heard any similar rumours or any other weird and wonderful stories that we didn't cover? I'd like to hear from you in the comments. And please stay tuned for more episodes along this line, so next time I think I'm probably going to cover some of Stoke's weirdest ghost and paranormal stories, and then who knows for future episodes, I haven't really decided yet, but yeah, it'll be Potteries Dialect or Potteries Culture or Potteries History related, so if any of that takes your fancy, stick around and tune in next time, and I'll say thee again soon.